Military strategists want you to believe that Germany's defensive lines were broken by superior Allied tanks, elite infantry units, or overwhelming air power. Hollywood shows dramatic breakthrough moments with Sherman tanks charging through smoke, MG-42s hammering in last stands, or desperate tigery ambushes. They're missing the real story. One American artillery piece, the M2 105mm Howitzer, systematically destroyed Germany's ability to defend Europe through the coldest mathematics of industrial warfare. This wasn't about heroics. This was about turning defense into a statistically impossible equation. Let's shatter the biggest myth right now. The M2 Howitzer wasn't just another artillery gun. It was the most mass-reduced artillery piece in human history, with over 10,000 units manufactured by American factories. But here's the devastating reality that German commanders discovered from Normandy to the Rhine. The M2 could deliver precise sustained fire at rates that made defending fixed positions a mathematical death sentence. Even heavily dug in MG-42 nests or concealed tigery Hulone positions were neutralized before they could meaningfully shape the battle. This wasn't theoretical firepower. This was battlefield mathematics that broke armies. A single M2 howitzer could fire 4 rounds per minute for hours without mechanical failure. American artillery doctrine called for batteries of 6 guns firing in coordination. Do the brutal arithmetic. 24 shells per minute, 14 and 40 shells per hour, over 10,000 rounds in a single day from one battery. The Germans were facing artillery fire rates that exceeded their entire ammunition production capacity, far more destructive than anything the Luftwaffe or their vaunted panzers could counter. But here's where it gets interesting. The weapon that actually broke German defensive doctrine wasn't the gun's rate of fire. It was American fire control innovation. The M2 used the revolutionary fire direction center system, where centralized plotting boards could coordinate dozens of batteries to strike single targets simultaneously. German defenders weren't just facing one howitzer. They were facing synchronized destruction from artillery pieces located miles apart. Even P-47 Thunderbolt ground attack strikes palled compared to the weight of destruction American howitzers could summon at will. A German infantry officer captured at Saint-Vit described the psychological horror perfectly. American artillery wasn't random bombardment like the previous war. It was surgical destruction. They could place shells exactly where they wanted them, exactly when they wanted them there. Every defensive position, every supply route, every communication line, nothing was safe from their mathematical precision. The numbers revealed the weapon's devastating impact on German defensive capabilities. Before encountering mass M2 formations, German defensive lines could withstand artillery bombardments for weeks. After American howitzer batteries achieved full deployment, German positions averaged less than 72 hours of survivability under sustained fire. The M2 had reduced the lifespan of defensive fortifications from weeks to days. Now let's talk about the tactical revolution that actually shattered German defense strategy. The concept of artillery superiority. American forces deployed M2 howitzers in ratios of 1 gun per 500 yards of front, creating overlapping fire zones that made German movement impossible during daylight hours. Defensive warfare had become statistically unsustainable against American fire concentrations. The versatility of the M2 made German defensive planning impossible. The same howitzer that destroyed bunkers with high explosive shells could eliminate armor with armor-piercing rounds, suppress infantry with airburst munitions, and create smoke screens for Allied advances. Shermans and infantry units advanced under this umbrella of fire, while German commanders complained that defending against M2 positions required preparing for multiple different types of attack simultaneously. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect was how the M2 changed the economics of defensive warfare. German defensive positions required months to construct and thousands of workers to complete. A single M2 battery could destroy these positions in hours, using shells that cost less than the concrete and steel used in construction. The mathematics of destruction had become more efficient than the mathematics of construction. American artillery officers calculated the brutal efficiency. One M2 howitzer, firing for 8 hours, could deliver more explosive force than an entire German artillery regiment could produce in a full day. The industrial advantage was overwhelming. German defensive doctrine assumed artillery support that simply didn't exist at American production levels. A captured German artillery commander revealed the scope of their disadvantage. We calculated ammunition expenditure based on Great War standards, perhaps 50 rounds per gun per day. The Americans were firing 500 rounds per gun daily. Our entire defensive strategy was based on mathematical assumptions that were 25 years out of date. The final darkest truth about the M2's impact on German defense: it forced German commanders to abandon the concept of linear defense entirely. Fixed positions became death traps under American artillery fire. The Wehrmacht shifted to mobile defense tactics specifically because the M2 Howitzer had made stationary defensive warfare impossible to sustain. Here's the brutal mathematics that broke Germany's defensive capabilities. The M2 Howitzer could deliver sustained, accurate fire at rates that exceeded German defensive construction capabilities. Every bunker built could be destroyed faster than it could be replaced. Every defensive line established could be neutralized before it became tactically effective. Defense had become a losing mathematical equation. German defensive doctrine manuals were rewritten multiple times during the war, specifically to counter American artillery tactics. Instructions shifted from hold positions at all costs to avoid American artillery concentrations through constant movement. The M2 hadn't just broken individual defensive lines, it had broken the entire strategic concept of positional warfare. An American artillery officer summed up the M2's revolutionary impact. Before deploying howitzer batteries in Europe, we thought artillery was about supporting infantry attacks. After watching German defensive lines disintegrate under sustained fire, we learned that artillery was about making enemy defensive positions statistically unsustainable. The M2 didn't just support our advances, it made German resistance mathematically impossible. Modern artillery doctrine, from self-propelled howitzers to rocket artillery to precision-guided munitions, all trace their tactical roots to lessons learned from M2 howitzer operations against German defensive positions. The weapon didn't just fire shells at enemy positions, it fired the mathematical proof that industrial production capacity could dominate tanks, planes, and machine guns alike.